Hello, BookTube. I've got another starter kit for you today. This is an Irish starter kit. Not to be confused with the video that I made earlier that someone pointed out to me where I talked about my favorite 5 Irish novels. This is instead going to be much broader, and because it's so much broader, it's really going to be more in the nature of just earnest recommendations rather than a starter kit, because Irish literature sprawls all over creation and is almost everywhere, almost better than anybody else. So, for instance, I'm not going to be dealing with drama here as just one example of the many things that I will not be dealing with. And also, I will be leaving out some Irish names. And if you are only looking for those names, I thought I would tell you ahead of time that they aren't in this video. So I will not be mentioning Oscar Wilde. I will not be mentioning, with all due respect to Jason Harrigan, I will not be mentioning Samuel Beckett. I will not be mentioning James Joyce. I will not be mentioning Edna O'Brien. I especially will not be mentioning Sally Rooney. So we're gonna talk about other things now, but I wanted you to know those aren't here in case you want to click off, rather than wait until the end of the video and leave a comment that is simply a sentence saying you did not mention, fill in the name, period. Simply a sentence, not a question, not engaging me in any way, not arguing why that name should be mentioned, just pointing that out as if I didn't know that. So I thought I would say that ahead of time, and now we will move on to the list, which could get a little long. And we're going to start with mytho-history, Irish myths and legends. They tend to steep Irish literature, so we'll start with a very handy volume from Penguin Classic. They have been doing this for a long time. They've been printing this volume for a long time. It's early Irish myths and sagas. This is the modern Penguin paperback look of it, but it's had many, many different looks over the last 60 years. And it's just standard good translations, the usual Penguin good introduction, good notes to some of the earliest stories in Irish mytho-history. They're good reading on their own, and this is a good volume to ground you. Also, the next would be the greatest of those mytho-hysteric stories, and that is the Táin. This is the Carson translation. The Kinsella translation is also very good and very popular. This is the story of the cattle raid of Cooley, among other things, and it is wonderfully done. This Carson translation is really good. The Kinsella translation is really good too, and the book here in Penguin Classics really encompasses a lot of the odd natures of Irish folklore, and maybe a little touch of Irish mythology, of old Irish theology. Terrific reading experience that has been adapted many, many times. Many writers have gone at that story and all other aspects of Irish mytho-history. The Irish are big on mytho-history. I would argue that even now, they largely live in a realm of mytho-history. So I wanted to recommend a couple of novels as well. I can recommend, for instance, Kenneth Flint's novel, A Storm Upon Ulster, which is a novel about the cattle raid of Cooley to begin with, and then it moves on to other things. The difference between this and a lot of other Irish historical fiction is that the supernatural element is very much involved in this book. So Bantam brought this out in its science fiction fantasy line. Once upon a time, you would have found this in that section of the bookstore. I don't think that Kenneth Flint is in print at all anymore. He did a lot of books based either loosely or very intently on Irish mytho-history, and I don't think any of them are in print anymore. They're all worth reading, but this is the best of them. And there's also, as long as I was including novels about mythic Ireland, I had to include one I was very, very fond of this author. This is a great big book, so it is a bit of an undertaking, but it's wonderful in its own way, in its own sudsy way. It's wonderful. This is The Lion of Ireland, and it is about the great Brian Boru, who, if you look him up on Wikipedia, you will get a tiny taste of the gigantic ecosystem of myth that has sprung up around this figure and Cuchulainn and Finn MacCool and a whole bunch of other figures like that. We could go on forever along those lines. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go on forever. We're going to press on to history. And there have been 80 million volumes of Irish history, and a lot of them are really worthwhile. I'm barely scratching the surface here. I am just making recommendations. And the natural recommendation for Irish history, probably the most lauded single volume of Irish history that has ever appeared in English, is Modern Ireland by R.F. Foster. Takes place from the Tudor era all the way to the Troubles. Basically, if you wanted to boil, this is a big book, but if you wanted to boil it down, it would be a single word: betrayal, over and over and over and over and over again. But Foster makes it really, this is one of those examples of a scrupulous magisterial history that is also readable, that isn't dry. So that had to be right up there. But there's another author that I want to recommend, and that is Dermot Ferriter. This is his book Between Two Hells, about the Irish Civil War, but really anything that he wrote. I don't think he's ever been in print in this country, in the United States, but I'm sure that he's still in print in the UK. I'm relatively sure that he is. But he's findable anyway. He wrote a few books, and they're all really, really good. And the Irish Civil War cast such a long shadow over everything else we're going to be talking about, that it's probably best, it's a very complicated subject, but probably best for you to read up on it, at least a little. Then we move on to Sean O'Casey. And there are lots of masterpieces that I could attribute to him, but I have always thought that the greatest thing he ever did was his gigantic cycle of autobiographies. That were put out once upon a time in the U.S. They were brought out in 2 volumes. They were thin little books, and so you could stack a few of them in one volume. So you would do 2 volumes of those. I picked just one here, the autobiographies. I Knock at the Door is the first one, and then they move on from there. And they really, in their combination of braggadocio and literary skill and self-pity and devotion to the ma, in all the stereotypical Irish elements, they really do combine a tremendous pitch in these books. It's heretical when it comes to Sean O'Casey, but I really think these are better than anything else that he ever wrote. Then we can move on to a bit of poetry. The Irish, of course, are great poets. They always have been. Their poetry takes a little bit of getting used to and tends to be monumentally sad. So I guess in the 21st century, where all of our reading is governed by moods, you probably want to take that into account. But Penguin Classics, to get back to Penguin Classics, they do a great volume. I don't know if they still publish it, but it's the Penguin Book of Irish Poetry, edited by Patrick Crotty. Great big 1,000-page thing that is terrific. It's a volume to live in. Really, it is. There are all kinds of other volumes of Irish poetry. Of course, it's a very popular kind of book to do. But this one is really, really good and has the virtue of being very accessible. Not just in terms of the way that it's organized, but also just physically. It's easy to get a Penguin book. But when it comes to the subject of Irish poetry, there have been centuries and centuries of it, and a lot of anthologies, not just that Penguin one, capture the variety there. But I think it is a truth universally acknowledged that Ireland has produced many, many great poets. Many of them. One great Irish poet, she just died a few years ago. But I think it's a truth universally acknowledged that Ireland has produced one poet greater than all the others, and that is William Butler Yeats. So on this list is the complete poems of William Butler Yeats. I don't know about this cover. I wouldn't buy this. I wouldn't pick it up off the street if it looked like this. But I am sure that there are a million collected poems of William Butler Yeats out there in the literary marketplace. So you can find whatever volume looks good to you, whichever one you can find. And again, as I've mentioned before, lately with certain poets, you got to live with this. Same thing with the Penguin Book of Irish Poetry. You have to live with it. You can't just blast your way through it. I know it's ironic for me to say that, but you can't. You really have to let Yeats work on you. And also there is a great 2-volume biography of him if you're interested. But then we can move on to fiction. Now I mentioned, I'll try to remember to leave a link. I did make a video of my 5 favorite Irish novels. And I'll include those here, but I won't go into much detail about them because I went into a lot of detail about them then. I wanted to add a few more here, including one for the gays. You got to have something for the gays. And the gay Irish subculture is incredibly interesting to study. Incredibly. Of course, for 1,500 years, you could not be gay anywhere in the world. On pain of social acceptability and on pain of your front teeth and on pain of living in the town, of being driven out of the town. It was a very, very serious thing. You could not be it. I mean, case in point, Oscar Wilde, but you could look back over 1,000 years before him and see the same thing, where you are born attracted to your own sex, and you know from very early on that you can never be that. Never. There's a whole other discussion that could be had here about the way that Irish culture sublimated that. Every culture finds a way to sublimate that. And tragically, I think for the world, the way that Irish culture chose to sublimate that was the clergy. I mean, if you're a shy, introverted, probably intellectual second son, and you know from age 5 that you don't, or at least from age 13, that you don't care for, you're not attracted to women. Well, the clergy shows you a man who probably at 13 was just like you. He's not expected to marry or have children, and he spends all day with his altar boys. He can go into anybody's home. He can ask them any questions. He is accepted without marrying and producing children. He's the only role in society that is. You'll be attracted to that. You might want to make that your life's devotion. And you won't know, for most of those 1,000 years, you won't know that the reason you're doing that is simply because you're not allowed to hold someone's hand in public. You'll think it's a spiritual calling. Anyway, I wanted to include something for the gays here. And of course, I chose At Swim, Two Boys by Jamie O'Neill. A big, very Joycean novel in its narrative gimmicks, but it's not Joycean in that it's really effective. It's really good. It has complete control of itself the whole time. And obviously, you know this book because it's very popular. It's the story of two boys that may or may not get a chance to hold each other's hands. Now I want to go quickly through the 5 Irish novels that I've already talked about. I mentioned Actress by Anne Enright. Absolutely terrific, and not only in terms of plot, but in terms of the way she narrates it, the particular narrative voice that she uses, which is something that you'll find in Irish fiction. Then Oliver St. John Gogarty, this is As I Was Going Down Sackville Street. This is an old Penguin classic, a weird and weirdly forgotten novel. Same thing with Jamie Plunkett's Strumpet City. It mystifies me that this is not taught in schools. It mystifies me that it's not a Penguin classic or that there aren't critical editions in the U.S. Then we have The Informer by Liam O'Flaherty. A thin but deeply subversive novel that leaves you in the typically Irish way wondering who to root for. Then we can do Bernard McClaverty's Cal, another thin novel. I want to address why so many of these novels are thin. I'll get to it. Don't you worry. I'll get to it. But I'm sure that a lot of you know this book. This is the story of a young man falls in love with an older woman and puts him at odds with his whole society. And then a slightly larger book. I had a little bit of a renaissance a few years ago when I got 2 different translations into English for the first time in forever. This is Martin O'Caden's book here called Graveyard Clay, with this crappy cover, but I believe the other English translation had a different title. This is a great book. It's a major Irish novel about people talking, dead people talking in a cemetery. But it is so unknown to the English-speaking West that it doesn't even have a codified common usage title. But at least now I know that there are 2 relatively modern translations, both of which are probably still in print, where you can go and sample what this is like and find out which of them, for instance, you prefer. Then we have this is by Colm Tóibín. You knew that he was going to crop up on this list. He edited another gigantic Penguin volume, the Penguin Book of Irish Fiction, that is 1,000 pages long and is the perfect companion to the Penguin Book of Irish Poetry. I don't know that this is one of those big orange spine Penguin trade paperbacks that we're going to see again on this list, or the most famous one of them all. I don't know if this is ever made into a black spine Penguin classic. I'm not sure that it has. But it's a great volume if you can find it. Then we come to an art form that I think the Irish excel at to the exclusion of the rest of the world. I think there are a whole bunch of good reasons for that. I know that the most famous work of Irish literature of them all is a 1,000-page novel. A crappy 1,000-page novel. But I think the Irish excel at short stories. And I think I know why. Because the Irish excel at talking. The Irish excel at talking. So you sit down at a table, at a pub, and once the Guinnesses are there, well, then you start talking. And it's never, usually once real Irish conversation gets going, it's never, how's the weather or how's the team doing on the TV. Instead, it's somebody's got a story to tell. Somebody's got a story that has a beginning, a middle, an end, characters, a theme, and a payoff. Take my word for it. If an Irish person or someone of Irish extraction says to you, have I got a story to tell you, tuck in. Because that's going to be a good experience. Whereas people from other cultural traditions, if they say, I've got a story to tell you, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know that at all. It probably won't be funny. It probably won't be heart-touching. And it probably won't be coherent. It will wander all over the place. I believe that cultural propensity, I think, entirely developed in churchyards after service and in pubs, is the reason why Irish people are so good at short stories. But I believe they are the world's best short story writers. So I have a whole bunch of short story recommendations here. I'm not ranking them. I am just enthusiastically recommending them. Brian Field, for instance, who I usually don't like, but when he writes short stories, he wrote a book called Stories of Ireland. That is terrific. There's Elizabeth Bowen. This is the Everyman's Library of her collected short stories, but there's also, in the United States forever and ever, there was just a solid, deep blue hardcover that you can find. And every one of these collections is great. They're all slightly different. If you took a name off a Liam O'Flaherty short story, I would know it. I would know that it wasn't an Elizabeth Bowen short story. It'd be difficult I'd need a whole hour to parse the differences between them. But if you like short stories, they're all really good. And if you don't think you like short stories, try Irish short stories, and you'll see. Then we have Mary Lavin. I don't think she's in print anymore. She really ought to be in Penguin Classics. But her collected stories are worth finding. But then again, most Irish writers, their collected stories are worth finding. Then we have something I've recommended on this channel a million times before, Frank O'Connor. This is the old trade paperback of his collected stories. He's had a number of different collected story volumes, so if you don't find this one, I'm sure you can find another one. He's amazing. All the things that these authors do are amazing. And every cultural tradition has a different way of going at short stories. Some of them like to build a whole world, so that when you start one of their short stories and then you finish it, you feel like you've read a novel. That isn't usually the case with Irish short stories. Irish short stories, this is very generalizing, but Irish short stories tend to give you a whole world, but it's an emotional world. It's the one whole rotation of an emotional world, often to the exclusion of the details of the outside world, so that you're not 100% sure about what's going on in the outside world, but you know because you've felt that you have had an emotional revolution. That probably doesn't make much sense, but you'll see. When you read some of these, you'll see. It's the one thing they all have in common. And since we're on short stories, we can finish there with perhaps the most famous Irish short story volume of them all, 1,000 pages, another of those orange spine penguins. This is the collected stories of William Trevor. These are, of course, there's a lot of stories in here, and they span the whole of this man's career. So some of them are more practiced than others, but all of them, almost all of them, have such genius in them, such genius, and such typically Irish genius, that I had to include it, and also to cap the video with it. And this is, like I said, this is not really a starter kit so much as it is just a series of enthusiastic recommendations, because look at all that I'm leaving out. Look at all the stuff that I'm leaving out. Juno and the Paycock, Playboy of the Western World, the poetry of Seamus Heaney. There's so much that I'm leaving out here, but this will do for a start. These things will do for a start. They all come with my enthusiastic recommendation. So I'll wrap this up for now. There was just the barest beginning of the vast body of Irish literature. But I'll be back. Thank you.